Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. We are September the 1st. Can't believe we're already back to school tomorrow. Super excited. As a mom, I'm happy to see my kids go off to school, especially after a long summer. All right, so in today's episode, we are going to be talking about why NOI is more important to look at than cap rate. And if you don't know what those things mean, that is okay. We're going to go through some of that today, and you'll hopefully leave today's session with a little bit more information. So my name is Hung Lu. I am with Cash Property Inc. And on today's Money Matter episode, we are going to deep dive into the NOI and cap rates and what the effects are with those two things and why the NOI is actually more important than the cap rate. So this came up through a coaching session. So I'm just going to answer the question on today's session as to, if you improve the NOI, how does that affect cap rate and all that stuff? Okay. And, you know, before you go and implement anything that I teach on today's session, please just go talk to another investor or your accountant, somebody else, just to get another opinion. So this is a super timely discussion because we're in, different markets across Canada, and sometimes looking at cap rates is super important. But what's actually more important is the NOI. Okay, so let's get into it. And I also want to say before while I'm bringing up the spreadsheet is that, thank you for watching these sessions. And it's super helpful if you watch it from beginning to end. I know sometimes the content can be really dry because it's just a lot of numbers, a lot of calculations. But if you put in the efforts to improve your financial literacy around investing in real estate, it will help you, it will help your family for generations to come. It is not just a one-time injection of knowledge. So I want to say thank you for that, because if you make your life better, you'll also make your kids' lives better and everybody else around you. So super, super grateful for you to be watching. So just remember to give me a like or subscribe to our channels. Okay, so let's deep dive into this. So this is the idea of Uncovic. Okay, so if you are looking at this for a first time, this is what it is. It's just a triangle, and this is a good reminder for people who are, who are already active in real estate. Okay, so Uncle Vic is a way to calculate the value of a building, your NOI, and also your cap rate. So those three things. So V is for your value, whether your purchase price, your sale price, it depends on the calculation that you're doing. And then the I is for your NOI. So this is usually your income after expenses. Now, depending on your calculation as well, it might just be your gross income or it could be your net income. In the cases that I use, it's usually your net income. So it's all of the income coming in, rents, parking, laundry, storage space, whatever income sources you have for that particular property or the business, minus all of your expenses, operating expenses. So not including your mortgages. Okay, that is the one little hiccup that I find that people miss when they are doing their VIC calculation. Okay, and then the C is the cap rate, and the cap rate is what is affected by the market. It is sort of a set number. We cannot affect the cap rate directly. Okay, but what we can affect is the income, which will affect the overall value of the building. Okay, so now the question that came up was, Hong, if I improve the NOI, how does that affect the cap rate? Okay, so if you just, go back to the original thinking of it, as long as you understand Uncle Vic, you can actually answer that question on your own. Okay. Because here's the thing, if you increase your I, okay, and your cap rate is the same, there's nothing you can do about the cap rate. The cap rate is the cap rate is the cap rate. Okay. And the cap rate will differ depending on your province and even on the city that you're in. So Toronto, the cap rate, three and a half. Vancouver, the same thing, maybe a little bit lower depending on who you're talking to. Alberta, maybe five. Okay, I sort of think Edmonton or Alberta is a little bit higher, but some people are arguing that it's, closer to 4.5%, 5%. Okay. The cap rate that I like to use is what's reported in the reports and what the lenders, people who are actually lending you money, their cap rate is what I look at. Okay, I could care less what other investors are saying the cap rates are. It's what the banks will actually lend to me based on the location. That's the cap rate that I use. Okay, and so you can just, call up a mortgage broker. You can look at reports on Google and they will tell you the latest cap rate. Okay, those are the ones that you want to look at. Okay, so let's just say you buy a property and you've got a gross income here of $200,000. Okay, so yeah, so I've already made the spreadsheet quite big. So what happens to the value and to the cap rate? Okay, so if this is your first time looking at a triangle formula, the way to use it is what's written in these yellow cells. Okay, so calculate the value. You just take your I divided by the C. If you want to calculate your I, it's just V times C. And if you want to calculate your C, it's just I divided by V. So you just literally cover the number that you're looking for, and then your formula is just based on that triangle. Okay, there's so many math formulas that fall into a triangle formulation, and that's just how you use it. Okay, so let's see here. So if your gross income is 200,000, okay, which is what's written in here. We're right now just putting in 60,000 for expenses, let's just say. Okay, and this of course is excluding debt. So any private lending for the loan or any private lending or mortgages, it excludes that. So this is just your, let's say, heat, your utilities, property taxes, insurance, any property management, all of that stuff would go into the expenses. Okay, so based on that, your NOI is just your income minus your expenses. Okay, so your 200,000 minus your 60,000 to give you your 140. So let's just say we're in an area where the cap rate is 5%. Okay, so it doesn't matter if we're talking about Vancouver, Toronto, Alberta, it doesn't matter. Okay, we're just saying that the cap rate's 5%. And this is the number that you're adjusting here, just so that we can get the example going. Okay, the value of this property is just your NOI, the income divided by your cap rate. So it's just your 140 divided by 5%. Okay, simple math. So this value of this building now is worth $2.8 million. Okay, so what that tells me is that, okay, if I'm going to buy this property, it really should only be around $2.8 million. Okay, so now let's just say that there's a way for me to increase rents or increase storage fees or something, and I'm able to increase the rental income or whatever the income that you want to call it. Let's just say I can increase this 200,000 to, let's just say, 300,000. Okay, so I'm going to go 300,000 here. My expenses are going to be the same. Okay, so it's just really to give you an idea of what's the impact on increasing your income. If you can do this, that's fantastic. Okay, because that income is forced appreciation. You're not waiting for passive appreciation here. Right now, in today's economy, you want to look at forced appreciation opportunities. It's just a smarter way of investing. Okay, so if you can get the income to 300,000, okay, which is a huge increase, your NOI now is 240,000. Okay, that's huge, right? So basically from 140 to 240. Your cap rate is still the same. That doesn't change. It doesn't matter how you improve the building. It doesn't matter how long it takes for you to improve the building. The cap rate is the cap rate is the cap rate. Okay. Now, if you are in a market and let's just say it's been 2 years, 3 years, okay, reach out and update your cap rate. But usually the cap rate doesn't change too much. Okay, so now let's just say your cap rate is exactly the same. You've been able to force appreciate within a short amount of time. Look at this value. Your property value now has gone up significantly, okay, from 2.8 to 4.8. Okay, this is huge, okay, because we can control, we have say in how we increase our incomes on these various investment opportunities. Okay. But we can't change the cap rate. Okay. So if you can increase the NOI, absolutely look at doing it, especially because now you've increased the value. What that means now is you can actually go and refinance, tap out, okay, tap into that equity that you've just built here, which is fantastic. Okay, so the other thing to keep in mind is let's just say now you're in a market where the cap rate is significantly higher. Okay, so let's just say you're in Saskatchewan, okay, where the cap rate's 8%. Okay, so you can see the value for this property has gone down to 3 million. Okay, so that's the thing that you need to weigh is okay, you could buy a property, let's say in Toronto, Vancouver at 5%. And if you make an increase in this property value by 100,000, that property value is going to be worth 4.8. Whereas if you're in Saskatchewan, even if you made this improvement and you're still seeing 240,000 of income, because the cap rate is so high, that property value is only worth 3 million. Okay, and I'm saying only because I'm comparing it to the 4.8. 3 million is a great number. Okay, but you need to consider, hey, is it worth my time to be in an 8% cap rate market where I can get 2.4%, 240,000 income, but the property value is only going to be 3 million? Or is it better for me to be in a cap rate area of 5%? If I increase the property value, like if I increase the income, my property value goes to 4.8. Okay, so that is an individual decision there. We, as the investors, we have control over the income. We can force appreciate. Okay. And force appreciation can come through increasing rents, increasing storage, laundry. Some of those things are just small needle movers. Force appreciation really would come from, say, adding an additional unit or going from a one bedroom and updating those to two-bedroom units. Okay. Now, if you're in the Toronto, Vancouver market and you're like, how do I force appreciate? Well, you're looking at maybe like, say, a single family property and modifying them and changing them to multifamily, like small multifamily units. And both in Toronto and Vancouver, we're allowed to do that now. Okay. So basically going from one or two units to 5, 6 units potentially. Okay. That's where the forced appreciation is. Okay, so the other thing to keep in mind here is that okay, so let's just run through this here. So let's just say you're in Saskatchewan, you have gross rents of 300,000, your expenses is, let's just say 60,000. That's actually a really good expense ratio. Okay, so now if your cap rate is 8%, okay, so now we're saying here the building is valued at 3 million. Okay, but let's just say here, based on these numbers, we're actually not making any money on the buy because the property value, like, so if the seller was selling it to us for 3 million, we're not making any money on the buy. Okay, so that's what this 3 million here is a manual input from us saying, hey, you know what? We found this building. The owners are asking for 3 million. Are we actually making any money here? We're not making any money on the buy. But let's just say that they're asking 2.5 million, okay, for this building here. So let's go in here and we'll update 2.5. Okay, so now what that means is the NOI is the same here. We've done whatever we've been able to improve it. The cap rate now is the cap rate is 9.6. Okay, but it doesn't matter that the cap rate's 9.6 because the market itself has the cap rate set at 8%. Okay, but it's good to know that by increasing the NOI and buying the property lower than what the value is set, what we could make from that. If the cap rate at 9.6 goes up, okay, that's actually a good thing for us as the investor because we want the higher cap rates, okay, as much as possible, okay, on the buy, right? So but once we're done with the renovations, we want that cap rate to actually go lower. okay? Because we want to recognize as much of that value. Okay, so let's go back to the Toronto number here. So let's go back to 200,000 here, three, okay? And I'm going to go back to 5%. Okay, so here we're saying that if we got the current property at 200,000 income, we have an expense of 60,000, we would be in, let's say, Toronto, Vancouver. If we could get the place at 5% cap rate, we would be paying $2.8 million, okay, for this. If the seller is willing to sell it to us for 2.5, that's fantastic. We've actually made money on this buy. We've made $300,000. Okay. And the cap rate actually is 5.6. So you can see we want to buy at the higher cap rate. Okay. But that depends on the location because you can't say, hey, you know what? I could buy a property in Edmonton for 8%. So that's a better purchase than a property at 5.6% in Vancouver. You can't compare like that. It needs to be in the same city that you're buying in. So in Vancouver, the cap rate is, let's say, 3% here. Okay, so this building should actually be worth $4.6 million. Okay, so of course we're not going to be able to buy it for 2.5. There's no way that the seller would, you know, lose that much money on it. Okay, because they usually will know the value of their building. So let's just say that we're able to get, okay, so a lot of the sellers overestimate what the value of their building is going to be. So let's just say that they have it listed at 5 million. Okay, because that's what I see a lot. Like the cap rates, the NOI, everything supports a lower value than what people are selling it for. So in this case, I'm saying that the building's actually only worth $4.7 million. But the seller's coming back and saying, no, Hung, you're wrong. The building's worth 5 million. You know, all the other buildings or whatever are selling for $5 million or more. I'm giving you a discount of 5 million. Okay, so here's the thing. So when they sell it to me at 5 million, I'm basing it on the current operating situation. Okay. So it's a 2.8% cap rate. That is not a good buy. I'm actually losing $300,000 here. Okay. But this is where you need to weigh it because let's just say I am able to go in here and I can increase this property from 200,000 to 300,000. Okay, so that was the example that we used earlier. Okay, so let's just say we go 300,000. Okay, so now based on that $300,000, okay, if that cap rate is 3%, look at that. This building now is worth $8 million. Okay, if I paid 5 million for it, this is actually a great deal because look at this. If I can increase the income from whatever sources to 300,000, and let's just say I can do it in a year. Okay, this building now is going to be worth $8 million. I can refinance, and it doesn't matter that I paid 5 million for this. It doesn't matter that I overpaid by 300,000 because I've now turned around and increased the value significantly. Okay, and I can go and refinance. So the NOI is going to stay 240, and the cap rate, which is your I divided by your V in this case, okay, is 4.8. Well, on paper, it's 4.8. It doesn't matter that it's 4.8. What matters is that I've been able to increase the NOI significantly using the current cap rate at 3 to increase the forced appreciation to $8 million. Okay, so that is why NOI is way more important than the cap rates when you're doing these analysis. Okay, so if you are looking for an investment opportunity, you need to understand this. When I was starting out in real estate, I didn't know about cap rates and stuff like that because for me, what was most important was what was my NOI? How much money did I make at the end of the day? Okay, it doesn't matter what market you're in, it doesn't matter what the cap rate is, as long as your NOI was constantly going up, then you were operating smarter. Okay, so my name is Hung Lu. I hope that all got across really well. Um, Okay, so I'm Hung Lu. I'm with Cash Property Inc. That is another episode of Money Matters. Um, Hope everybody have has a wonderful long weekend. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Bye bye.